Hello programmers, I'm going to keep talking about exceptions. We'll create this little plane class just to demonstrate some things. It's just got a constructor, it's a default constructor, it doesn't take any input arguments, and all it does is print a line plane created to the screen. And then the destructor, when that plane goes out of scope, it's going to say plane destroyed. So I want to throw an exception of type plane, and I'm going to do that in function 2. This isn't how you normally use exceptions. Normally exceptions are exceptional events, things that happen once in a blue moon when things go wrong. But in this case, this function will always throw this exception no matter what. And function 1, its only job is to call function 2, which is going to throw that exception. So you might wonder, well, there's no try or catch block in function 1. Is this going to be a problem? Is this exception that's thrown ever going to be caught and handled? Well, it is. If we look down in main, main is the function that's going to call function 1. Function 1 calls function 2, and every time you call a function, information stored on the stack. If you don't immediately catch a thrown exception, then the stack's going to be unwinded until one of the functions does catch that exception. And if nobody catches the exception, you're gonna abort the program, crash. Sometimes you'll get a core dump. So in main, I call function 1, function 1 calls function 2 throws that exception, we go back to function 1, nobody catches that exception, so we unwind the stack and we go to main, and main is able to catch that exception and print exception caught, or caught exception. Alright, so that was a little bit about exceptions. We could also catch the exception of type plane with a default exception handler. Now this ... this will catch anything. So it doesn't matter whether we're throwing an object of type plane or an int or a string, that'll catch anything that hasn't been caught yet. Alright, on a different topic, I am going to erase these functions. And instead of talking about exceptions, I want to talk about something else. So let me create an instance of plane that's not going to be an exception. I'm just going to create in main a Boeing 747. And then I'm also going to create another plane that might have a lot of similarities to the Boeing 747, and we'll just call this Boeing 737. And we want to copy everything from the one plane and put it in the other plane. And we can do this in this way. So we've seen this with integers. If you have an int x is equal to 5, you can say int y gets a copy of x. And that would be basically the same thing as saying y is equal to x. So we're going to try to do that here and see what happens, and we might be a little bit surprised at what we see on the screen. So I'll go ahead and run this, and what the surprising part is that we only see one message for the default constructor, but we see two messages for the destructor. So it looks like only one plane was created, but we can tell two planes were created because we can see the destructor was called twice when these planes went out of scope. So what's going on here? Well, there's an extra constructor function that we haven't talked about yet that the compiler is creating for us. It is called a copy constructor. And if I wanted to control what happens with the copy constructor, I could write my own version of the copy constructor. So it's a constructor, so the name of the function matches the name of the class, and the argument to the copy constructor is an object that's a reference to a type plane, a constant reference in this case. So we're going to pass in one object of type plane and hope to get out a copy of that object. Copy all of the fields. In this case, there's nothing to copy. The plane is empty, but we would copy all the fields from one object and put them in the other object. So now that I've implemented the copy constructor myself, then I should, when I run this, see that statement copy made printed out, and that'll help explain how we've constructed the second airplane. And I run this and I see, yep, the first airplane, the Boeing 747, that has a default constructor plane created. Our second one, we are running the copy constructor. So we see copy made, plane destroyed, plane destroyed. That's when both of these planes go out of scope at the end of main. All right, what about if we don't want people to just be able to make a copy of one of our objects using a copy constructor? Well, in that case, you can use a keyword delete to block someone from making a copy using a copy constructor. So this way the compiler won't create the copy constructor for you. So if I try this, you can already see that's underlined in red, and you see the error message saying this, you can't do this because it's a deleted function. So this line doesn't even make sense. Another place where you would see it wouldn't make sense because the copy constructor has been removed is if you were trying to make a copy of cout or cin. So cout is an output reference, an output stream. So if I said I want to make a copy of cout and pass in cout as an argument, it's not going to allow this. And the same thing with iStream, and if I wanted a copy of cin and I passed in the cin object. So if you look in the documentation, both OStream and iStream have a equals delete when it comes to the copy constructor, because it doesn't really make sense to have two copies of cout or two copies of cin, because when somebody types something at the keyboard, you know, is it the copy that's going to read it or the original cin? That wouldn't really make any sense. And the same thing with printing things to cout, you know, does it really make sense to have two places for that printout to go? So you can't do either one of these. Just like if you had deleted the copy constructor for the plane, you can't create a plane in this way. All right, that's enough for now. Happy programming.